Third of Americans say they would rather give up sex than lose their cell phones.
It's a staggering statistic. And when you start looking at the behavioral data underneath it, the picture just gets even more
All
intense.
the numbers are just wild because the research we are looking at today shows that something like 79% of smartphone owners check their devices within 15 minutes of waking up.
Wow.
Yeah, every single morning. And industry insiders actually estimate that we engage in about 150 daily sessions on our phones.
Right.
150 times a day, we are pulling this glowing rectangle out of our pockets, swiping, tapping, just, looking for something.
And, well, when you hear those numbers, the immediate reflex for most of us is to view it as this huge personal failing. We think, I have absolutely no willpower, or I'm just an easily distracted
Just not
person.
blame ourselves.
Exactly. But that fundamentally misreads the situation. Our actions, these daily digital routines, they have been engineered. The compulsion you feel to check your screen isn't an accident at all. It is a highly calculated blueprint.
And unpacking that blueprint is exactly the mission of today's deep dive. We've got a massive stack of sources today: behavioral research, case studies, and our own notes, all centered around a framework called the Hook model.
Right, which was laid out in your Reels book, Hooked.
Yes, exactly. We're going to explore the exact mechanics of how products manufacture habits. We want to figure out how, like, a simple string of code displayed on a screen shifts from being a minor external interruption to taking up permanent automatic residence in your brain.
To really understand how our minds are being hacked, though, we first have to understand the business imperative behind it. Why are companies investing billions of dollars in behavioral psychology just to build these habits?
Because it's definitely not by accident.
No, not at all. It ultimately comes down to something called customer lifetime value.
Okay, let's unpack that term. Customer lifetime value. What does that actually look like in practice for a tech company?
So it's essentially the total amount of money a business can expect to make from a single customer over the entire duration of their relationship. When a product becomes a habit, the length and frequency of a customer's usage just skyrocket.
Makes sense.
And with that habituation comes massive pricing flexibility. Warren Buffett has famously said you can judge the strength of a business by the amount of agony they go through in raising prices.
So if I'm completely habituated to, say, a supposedly free mobile game, right, like Candy Crush, I'm playing it every day
Okay.
on my commute,
Right.
and eventually I hit a really hard level or I run out of lives. Paying $2 for that extra life or, a special power suddenly doesn't seem like a big deal because the habit is already so ingrained in my day.
Precisely. You aren't really paying for the game at that point. You are paying to maintain the routine. And on top of that, these habits supercharge growth through what is known as viral cycle time.
That's the speed at which one user invites another user, right?
Okay. Yes, exactly. When your product is a daily habit, users are initiating those viral loops constantly. They're tagging photos, sharing posts, sending invites. That accelerates growth exponentially.
Right.
But perhaps the biggest advantage, like the real holy grail for these companies, is that user habits act as an incredibly sharp, competitive edge against rivals. It builds a moat around the business.
Yeah, I noticed in the research a concept from John Gorville. He's a Harvard Business School professor, and it points out a pretty brutal reality for anyone trying to launch a new startup.
Oh, the 9 times rule.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gorville's research shows that to displace an old habit, a new product cannot just be marginally better. It has to be 9 times better.
9 times. That seems almost impossibly high. Why is the bar set there?
Because old habits die incredibly hard. Our brains are, well, they're biological organs designed to conserve energy. Learning a new behavior requires conscious thought, which burns a lot of glucose.
That's literally exhausting.
Exactly. Relying on an established habit is energetically free. So even if a new product has clear objective benefits, the cognitive cost, the mental friction of changing behavior is just massive.
The ultimate example of this cognitive friction is literally right in front of us. The QWERTY keyboard.
Oh, yeah.
It was designed in the 1870s for the physical typewriter, specifically placing common letters far apart so the metal type bars wouldn't swing up and jam together.
Which is a mechanical limitation that hasn't existed for, what, decades?
Decades. We have had completely flat digital keyboards for years. The notes mention that a Professor August Dvorak actually patented a vastly superior, much faster keyboard layout in 1932 that placed all the vowels in the center row.
Oh.
Yeah,
well.
it actually makes typing easier and faster.
But the Dvorak keyboard completely failed to catch on.
Completely.
because the cost of relearning how to type of fighting against that ingrained muscle memory was simply too high for the average person. Gordy survives purely because the friction of changing user behavior is so immense.
So if a company wants to build a habit that sticks like QWERTY, the sources say the product has to land in the habit zone. And that is an intersection of two things, right? Frequency, meaning how often you do the behavior, and perceived utility, which is how useful you think it is.
Yeah, a great way to visualize this is comparing search engines. Take Google and Bing.
Okay.
If you run a blind search on both, the actual quality of the results is almost identical. But Bing often feels slower or clunkier to a habitual Google user simply because the interface is slightly different.
Even if the load times are the same.
Exactly. That tiny bit of cognitive friction ruins the experience.
Mhm.
Google relies on being a high-frequency habit. I mean, you search dozens of times a day.
But then on the other end of the habit zone, you have a giant like Amazon. Because I'm definitely not buying things on Amazon 150 times a day, so the frequency is a lot lower.
True, but the perceived utility is massive. Amazon has become so confident in their perceived utility that they actually run advertisements for competitors' products on their own site.
Wait, really? They let you comparison shop right there.
Yes, they do this because they want to be the default solution to your purchasing needs. They want the cognitive habit of finding an item to live entirely on their platform, even if they miss out on one specific sale.
Okay, so if we're talking about utility, I want to challenge something here. In the startup world, investors always ask founders, are you building a vitamin or a painkiller?
Right, the classic question.
Yeah, because painkillers solve an immediate throbbing need. If you have a migraine, you take Tylenol. Vitamins are just nice-to-haves. They appeal to emotional needs or long-term health, but nobody wakes up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night needing to take a vitamin C gummy
Definitely not.
or needing to update their Instagram status. So aren't these social apps and games just vitamins? They are fun, but they're not essential.
It's a common way to categorize products, sure, but there is a critical shift that happens with habit-forming technology. They start as vitamins, offering a nice emotional boost or some entertainment, but through repetition, they become painkillers.
Wait, how do they become painkillers?
Well, a habit is successfully formed when not doing the action causes a psychological itch, a very real, albeit slight, mental pain. You don't realize you need the app until it becomes deeply embedded in your routine.
Oh, I see.
And when you inevitably feel that discomfort, using the product acts as the immediate remedy.
So if these apps are functioning as painkillers, what exactly is the underlying pain they are trying to cure?
That brings us to the very first step of the hook model, the trigger. A trigger is the cue that initiates a behavior, and they come in two forms. The first is external triggers, which are things in your environment.
Like what?
Well, these are paid triggers like online ads, earned triggers like viral press, relationship triggers like a friend texting you an invite, and owned triggers.
Own triggers being things like the app icon sitting right there on your phone's home screen or a push notification.
Yes, but an owned external trigger only works if the user allows it into their space. The ultimate goal for any tech company is to transition you away from those external cues and rely entirely on internal triggers.
Internal triggers.
Right. This happens when a product tightly couples itself with a pre-existing routine, a thought, or an emotion. You can't see or hear an internal trigger. It manifests automatically in your mind.
And from what I'm reading in the research, that emotion is usually negative. It's boredom, loneliness, frustration, or confusion.
That is the core driver. There was this fascinating 2011 study at the Missouri University of Science and Technology. Researchers tracked the internet usage of over 200 undergrads and then cross-referenced that behavioral data with students who had visited the campus health clinic for depression.
Okay.
They found that participants with depressive symptoms engaged in significantly higher email usage, video watching, and gaming.
Because they were experiencing negative emotions more frequently and seeking out that mood-lifting relief through technology.
Exactly. To figure out what that core emotional trigger is for a specific product, designers actually use a technique adapted from the Toyota production system called the 5 Whys.
How does that work? You just keep asking why someone is doing something.
Pretty much. You drill down through the layers. Say you are looking at why someone uses email so obsessively. Why use email?
To send and receive messages.
Right? Why?
To share information quickly.
Right.
To know what is going on with coworkers and family.
Right.
To know if someone needs you.
And why?
Because you have a core underlying fear of being out of the loop or socially isolated.
Boom! You hit the raw emotional nerve. It always traces back to an underlying human need. We seek pleasure to avoid pain. We seek social acceptance to avoid rejection.
You know what that reminds me of from the notes? The analogy of the oyster and the pearl?
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah, an oyster doesn't just spontaneously decide to make a pearl because it wants to be pretty. It starts with a tiny irritant, like a piece of grit or a parasite that gets inside the shell. That's the trigger.
Right.
The oyster then blankets that irritating grit with layers of smooth mother of pearl to soothe the physical discomfort.
It is a perfect metaphor for digital habits.
Right. The grit is your underlying anxiety or boredom. And the mother of pearl is that smooth, frictionless, infinite scroll on TikTok that just coats over your anxiety so you don't have to feel it.
So true.
So next time you mindlessly open a social app, stop and ask yourself, what was the negative emotion I felt 2 seconds ago? Was I bored? Was I lonely?
And the implication of that internal trigger is profound for a business. If a company can successfully attach their product to your internal emotional itch, they completely eliminate the need for expensive external marketing.
They don't have to remind you.
Exactly. They don't have to buy billboard space or run targeted ads to remind you to use their app. Your own internal psychology does the work for them automatically.
Okay, so my brain has felt that emotional itch. We have the internal trigger. But what ensures I actually take the step to scratch it? Just because I'm bored doesn't mean I automatically open a specific app.
This moves us to the second phase of the hook model, action. For an action to occur, doing has to be significantly easier than thinking. This phase is governed by the Fogg behavior model, developed by Dr. B.J. Fogg at Stanford.
Okay, I think I saw this in the notes.
Yeah, the formula is quite simple. B equals MAT. Behavior occurs when motivation, ability, and a trigger are all present at the same exact moment and in sufficient degrees.
Let me see if I can ground this. It's kind of like if my phone rings in the other room. If it's buried at the bottom of a heavy backpack and I know I can't reach it before it goes to voicemail, my ability is severely limited.
Right.
So I don't answer it. The behavior fails. Now, if it's sitting right next to me, but the caller ID says spam risk, I don't answer it because my motivation is absolute zero.
Exactly.
And if the phone is right next to me and I want to talk to the person, but it's on silent and face down, I miss the call because there was no trigger. B equals MAT. If anyone is missing, you don't cross the action line.
That is a great way to look at it. So when product designers look at that formula, they have to make a crucial decision about where to invest their resources. Do you spend millions of dollars making users want to use the product more, which is increasing motivation?
Right.
Or do you spend that money making it easier to use, increasing ability?
Well, the source is, quote, A Rule of Innovation by Dennis Hopley, which essentially says that reducing the steps to complete a task is the ultimate driver of adoption. Easier always equals better.
Yes. Companies should almost always prioritize increasing ability over motivation. As we discussed with the brain conserving energy, humans are biologically wired to take the path of least resistance.
We're lazy.
We are. It is incredibly expensive and psychologically difficult to change what people want. It is much more effective to simply remove the obstacles in their way.
You can see this if you track the evolution of creating content online. Back in the Web 1.0 days, if you wanted to publish something, you had to know coding, buy a domain, host a server.
Yeah, huge barriers.
Then Blogger came along and removed the coding steps. Then Twitter came along and limited it to 140 characters, so you didn't even have to think about writing a whole essay. Now, apps like Instagram or Snapchat just require you to tap a single button to share a photo.
Twitter is actually a fascinating case study in prioritizing ability. If you look at their homepage from back in 2009, it was a cluttered mess.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, it had blocks of text, multiple links, and complicated explanations trying to boost user motivation by explaining why you should join. It asked users to broadcast their activities, which was a confusing concept at the time.
But by 2012, they completely stripped that homepage down. They got rid of all the explanatory text. It became just a large, compelling image and two massive, clear calls to action. Sign in or sign up.
Exactly.
They stopped trying to convince you to want it and just made it frictionless to take the first step.
Yep, they maximized ability.
I hear you on making things incredibly easy, but I have to push back a little here. I don't feel like a mindless zombie just clicking big buttons.
Fair enough.
If I'm walking through a store and I see a buy one, get one half off sign, I don't just blindly throw my credit card at the cashier. I'm doing the math in my head to see if it's actually a good deal.
Yeah.
I am making a rational, conscious choice, aren't I?
You are making a choice, but our rational brains are incredibly lazy. When faced with complexity, we rely heavily on heuristics, which are mental shortcuts, to make decisions quickly. And these shortcuts are highly exploitable by design.
Give me an example of one of these shortcuts.
Consider the scarcity effect. Researchers conducted a study where they put 2 identical cookies in one jar and 10 of those exact same cookies in another jar.
Okay.
Participants consistently rated the cookies in the near-empty jar as more valuable and better tasting.
Even though they were exactly the same.
Identical. The mere appearance of scarcity altered their perception of value. Amazon uses this heuristic constantly. When you see only 14 left in stock, in red text, it bypasses your rational cost-benefit analysis and creates an immediate sense of urgency.
Yeah, that makes sense. The notes also mention the endowed progress effect, which I love because it totally explains my local coffee shop.
The car wash study.
Yes, researchers gave out punch cards for a car wash. One group gets a blank card that requires 8 punches for a free wash. Another group gets a card with 10 slots, but the first 2 are already punched for free.
Right.
Mathematically, both groups still need to buy 8 washes to get the reward, but the group that got the card with the 2 free punches had an 82% higher completion rate.
Wow.
Because that visual shortcut told their brain they already had a head start, they were more motivated to finish.
And this raises a profound question about how deep these heuristics actually go. It is not just about tricking your wallet or getting you to buy a coffee. These mental shortcuts literally alter how your brain perceives physical reality and pleasure.
Which is terrifying.
It is. Consider the framing effect. There is a famous experiment where the world-class violinist Joshua Bell played a free, impromptu concert in a busy Washington, D.C. subway station.
Oh, right, playing a Stradivarius or something, right?
Exactly, a multi-million-dollar instrument. Almost no one stopped to listen. The context, the frame of a dirty subway told their brains that the music wasn't valuable.
Even crazier is the wine study using an fMRI machine.
Yes, functional magnetic resonance imaging. It is basically a machine that tracks real-time blood flow in the brain to see what regions are physically lighting up and becoming active.
Right, so researchers put people in this brain scanner and had them taste wine through a tube. They told the participants they were drinking a cheap $5 bottle, and then later told them they were drinking a premium $90 bottle.
Right.
The fMRI scan showed actual physical spikes of increased blood flow in the pleasure centers of the brain when they drank the $90 wine.
Right.
But the researchers were feeding them the exact same cheap wine both times.
It's incredible.
The artificial price tag literally changed the biological sensation of pleasure in their physical brains.
Which perfectly sets up the third phase of the hook model. We have felt the internal emotional trigger, we have taken the incredibly simple action fueled by those mental heuristics, and now we arrive at the variable reward. This is what answers the ultimate question. Why do we keep coming back?
To figure this out, the research takes a surprisingly dark turn into animal testing. In the 1940s, 2 researchers, James Olds and Peter Milner, implanted electrodes deep into the brains of lab mice.
Yeah, the study is wild.
The mice were put in a box with a lever, and when they pressed it, they gave themselves a tiny electric shock to a specific brain region. The mice became so unbelievably hooked on this sensation that they would forego food, ignore water, and even run across electrified grids, burning their paws just to press that lever again.
Olds and Milner initially thought they had discovered the brain's ultimate pleasure center, but our understanding has evolved. A much more recent study by Stanford's Brian Knutson used fMRI technology on human subjects while they played gambling games.
And what did they find?
The scans revealed something completely counterintuitive. The nucleus accumbens, which is that same reward center the mice were stimulating, didn't actually spike when the financial reward was received.
Wait, so getting the money didn't cause the spike?
No. The intense neurological spike happened in anticipation of the reward. Once the outcome was revealed, the activity actually calmed down. It is the stress of desire, the itching craving of what might happen that compels us to act, not the payoff itself.
And the engine that drives that anticipation is variability, unpredictability. B.F. Skinner proved this decades ago with pigeons.
Yeah.
If a pigeon pecks a lever and gets a food pellet every single time, it learns the routine, sure, but it doesn't go crazy. It just eats when it's hungry.
Right.
But if you make the reward intermittent, sometimes a peck gets a pellet, sometimes it gets nothing, sometimes it gets 2. The pigeon will tap that lever obsessively, almost infinitely.
That intermittent reinforcement is what keeps the dopamine flowing. In modern digital products, These variable rewards generally fall into a few distinct categories. The first is rewards of the tribe, which revolves around social validation.
Because we're social creatures.
Exactly. We are a deeply social species. Our brains are heavily wired to seek acceptance and status within our group to ensure survival.
A great example of this from the tech world is Stack Overflow. It is a Q&A website for software developers where people spend hours writing highly technical, complex answers to other people's coding problems completely for free
Yeah, why do they do it?
because the community votes on the best answers. You earn points and badges. It's a highly variable reward of social status. You don't know how many upvotes you'll get when you post.
Right.
Or look at a massive video game like League of Legends. They had a huge problem with toxic players ruining the experience. So they introduced honor points that players could award to each other after a match for good sportsmanship.
Oh, that's smart.
It effectively weeded out the trolls by creating a variable, socially conferred status symbol that players craved.
The next category is rewards of the hunt. We are hardwired to search for resources and information. Evolutionary biologist Daniel Lieberman points out that for the vast majority of human history, long before projectile weapons were invented, we hunted using a technique called persistence hunting.
How does that work without weapons?
Well, humans have a unique biological advantage. We can sweat to cool our bodies down while running. Quadrupeds, like a 500-pound kudu antelope, have to pant to dissipate heat, and they cannot pant while they are galloping.
Oh, I see.
So indigenous groups like the Saman people of southern Africa will separate an animal from the herd and simply chase it during the extreme heat of the day. The human hunter just keeps up a steady, relentless pace for up to 8 hours. The animal eventually collapses from sheer heat exhaustion.
That is incredible. They just outlast the animal.
Yes. And what keeps that hunter running for 8 hours under the blistering African sun? Dopamine. The variable reward of tracking the footprints, spotting the animal in the distance, losing it, and finding it again.
The notes have this great, simple analogy about this need for unpredictability. Think about a baby encountering a dog.
Okay.
The baby laughs hysterically because of the unpredictable novelty of the animal's behavior. It jumps, it barks, it licks. But once the dog's behavior becomes entirely predictable, the baby gets bored and looks for a new toy.
Makes sense.
Our adult brains are no different. If an app is totally predictable, we just tune it out. We need the hunt.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the exact same dogged, dopamine-driven determination that kept early humans tracking prey across the savannah is the exact same mental machinery keeping you endlessly scrolling through a Pinterest feed or a news app.
That's a wild comparison.
You are hunting for that next perfect image, that next provocative headline. The context has shifted from the physical world to a digital smartphone, but the underlying neurological wiring is absolutely identical.
Okay, let's pull all of this together and look at the journey we've been on. The hook starts with an internal trigger, a negative emotional itch like anxiety, boredom, or loneliness.
Right.
That discomfort pushes you to take an action, a behavior that product designers have made incredibly frictionless, heavily influenced by cognitive shortcuts so you don't even have to think about it.
Yes.
And that incredibly easy action leads you to a variable reward, an unpredictable payoff of social validation or resource hunting that spikes your dopamine in eager anticipation of what comes next.
And understanding the structure, understanding the choice architecture built around you is how you can begin to take your power back. You can actually use the Fogg behavior model in reverse to break bad habits.
Break the formula.
Exactly. If B equals MAT and you want to stop mindlessly scrolling at night, you remove the ability by leaving your phone in another room. Or you remove the trigger by turning off all notifications. When you clearly recognize the hooks embedded in the products you use, you can begin to separate your genuine, conscious desires from these manufactured compulsions. You can finally see the strings pulling at your attention.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Today, we've talked about how apps use general human psychology, these broad behavioral models, to hook us. But what happens when the next generation of habit-forming products utilizes artificial intelligence and deeply personal biometric data?
That's the real frontier.
Imagine your smartwatch continuously tracking your heart rate, or your device's front-facing camera tracking your pupil dilation, identifying your exact emotional state in real time. What happens when an algorithm can deliver the precise variable reward you need at the exact millisecond your biometrics show you're feeling an internal emotional trigger?
It's a scary thought.
If they can hook us this effectively, using generic one-size-fits-all algorithms. How will we possibly defend our attention when the hooks are biologically and perfectly personalized to us? It makes that statistic from the very beginning, that one-third of Americans would rather give up sex than their cell phones, seem like just the tip of the iceberg.